Part 2 from Simon. How do you stay focused while exploratory testing?
Yeah, that's another very good question, and it can be really difficult to do that. I'm just seeing if I've got some materials, and I'm just seeing if I've got anything that can be useful here. Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay.
Sure is.
Ooh. So share screen. Okay, so. And I was presenting it, but it did weird things to my screen, so apologies for that. So when we want to keep on scope to our testing, I've talked about what Elizabeth Hendrickson said about exploring something with our scope of our tools to discover information about our risk. This kind of test, and if I give an example here about the chair seat again, so different chair seats with different sizes of person to discover information about whether or not the chair seat might be too narrow for people. As I'm going through my testing, I've got this in mind, and I'm exploring, I'm doing different things. Because of the creativity that's involved in exploratory testing, you're coming up with test ideas very quickly. You know, I might say, what if a person's, wearing jodhpurs and it's made their hips much bigger? What if a person has got a backpack on? Or what if they're wearing, a saddlebag, or they've got cargo pants on? Things that are making them wider. But what if they're just bigger people? But then what about the weight? As soon as I go into weight, I don't want to stop my creative flow. But that's outside of the scope of this seat being too narrow. So what I tend to do is, as I notice that I'm going veering off, I might go a little bit off because my creative flow is going. But I go, do you know what? I'll write that down. And in my test notes, I add test idea, weights of people. And then I move back to what my scope is, and I go, right, back to people being narrow. How thin can someone be? What if they sit sideways? Is that a problem? Okay, if they're sideways, what if they sit backwards on the chair? What if they start resting on the back of the chair? But the back of the chair might not support their weight. Okay, that's another thing that's not related to the narrowness of somebody. So again, make another note and think about coming back to that at the end of my testing. Come up with a new charter related to those things. So it does ultimately revolve around you having very clear playgrounds in which to play, where you say, I know that I'm looking for this type of risk information in this playground. Therefore, I can see when I'm going out of it, and having the discipline to note that down and keep going. But don't be too hard on yourself with regards to that as well. You might go off on a slight tangent for a little bit and then notice it and go, I've just spent 10 minutes on that. You're still finding information, but just remember, try and come back to it when you do notice these types of things. But yeah, don't, beat yourself up too much about it, because you want that creativity. You want to keep going because you don't know if it will lead you back around to something useful, but try to keep that somewhat reined in and do have that discipline. It's something you'll learn. And it's something that if you do paired testing, somebody else can help you with. If we're pairing right now, Vernon, for example, on these types of things, and I was like, oh yeah, what about if, we've got a really heavy person, they're like 500 pounds of weight and it's going to collapse in the bottom of the chair and the hydraulics. You might go, yeah, but is that related to narrowness? Let's mark that down, note it, and move on. So having, especially when you're learning to exploratory test, pairing with somebody will really help you there. But do remember these things about exploratory testing, as we say, it has that specific nature, but it is flexible, and we are aligned towards investigating different opportunities when we do our exploratory testing. So bugs will cluster. We know this. Those of us that have done the ICEB, whether you approve of it or not, those of us that have done it, we will know bugs tend to cluster on things. So don't be afraid if you say, do you know what, I'm going to take 10 minutes out of my playground to try and drill into this and get that information that will help debugging this issue. That can only be a good thing to do.
Well, I hope that was an acceptable answer. If not, then let us know in the comments and we can loop back around. Great question. Thank you.